All right. Good morning, everyone. As everyone gets in and gets settled, let's get set up for an amazing Monday mindset. Welcome, everyone, to Monday Mindset on the Client Acquisition and Scaling Private Group Call. We do this every Monday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. And we do it to get our minds right and have an amazing, prosperous week. This week, we're doing something we haven't done in a super long time. We are doing a member hot seat. And that's where we take a member of our community, we put them on the hot seat, and we ask them a ton of questions about their business, their success, what's going on, in an effort to show you other people and what they're doing. And this week's a little bit different and a little special because our guest today is Mr. Danny Rios. And Danny is a little bit different because if you don't already know this, Danny and I are together going on a journey with a course and our VIP and some things. But I thought it'd be really fun to just treat him like everyone else and hear his story before we went on this journey. And it'll help you understand probably why I decided to go on this journey with him. So that is what we are going to do today. We are going to put Danny on the hot seat and see what we can do. So any questions, remember on hot seats, you guys can ask questions and, ask for more clarification or just anything you want to know. So welcome, Danny, to the call. Appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks for having me.
I would love to start with a little bit. I would like to kind of rewind and go back to when you owned an agency. And when I say that, a traditional agency. And I'd like you to talk about a little bit about, how you got started and what you were doing in your agency, because I think that's going to set the stage from when we talk about why you're firing, your traditional agency clients. So could you do that for us?
Sure. Well, first of all, I started in marketing because I was running my own business, a traditional brick and mortar business. I was in the automotive world. And I got in kind of early, back when, I'm going to date myself, when Yahoo was still equal to Google, and I remember spending a fortune and going to a Yahoo pay-per-click course. If that tells you, when Yahoo was still competitive. And I just remember just being fascinated and always wanting to be able to drive more business. I wanted to make more money. I spent a fortune and hired the lady that actually put on the seminar for my company. And that was back then. I want to say it was back in 06, 07. I paid her like $6,000, set up a pay-per-click campaign, which now seems ridiculous. And anyway, that's how I got my start. I was like, I could do this. I like this. And so I started taking courses, and I'll tell you, there was no better education in getting into the world when it was your own money, and we were spending, a ton of money in pay-per-click, probably about $5,000 a month. I did that before I got my feet wet in SEO. I paid someone a fortune. Back then, about $20,000 to build a website. And it was the best investment I ever did. And I'm like, man, this is fun. And they were very professional. As a matter of fact, I've actually helped them with some stuff because I used to send them business because I didn't want to do websites anymore, which we can get into that as well. And when I had the opportunity to get out of the automotive industry, I just loved everything about marketing. I liked growing businesses. I just loved it. And so I started my own agency, and all of my clients that I started with were from the automotive world. They were my old contacts. Some were even competitors at one point. And I grew my business. Even to this day, it's been all organically. So I just talk to people whenever I walk into a business. I would, hey, how's this going? And it was just very conversational. And that's basically what I did. I never really had to do any kind of lead gen. And that's what got me started in the world. It was my own money, and I said I could do this, and then I started doing it for other people.
So Danny, when it comes to your agency, what services were you providing for your customers?
Because I was always, I'll say, a one-man team, even though I did have a couple VAs. I'd like to say that when I was running the automotive business, I had about 50 employees. And so I found that I was babysitting a lot and more managing people than I was growing my business, and it burned me out. And so when I got into building my business, that was in my past. I knew what I didn't want to do. And I started taking courses, with some pretty well-known SEO people, more on the local side. And so I first started with SEO. I started with SEO and I learned it. And I very quickly started using white label providers. And that brings its own challenges. But the most important thing for me is I didn't want to manage people. I did have an in-house VA that actually still worked for me, doing things here and there. He's been with me many years. And, I would say it was primarily SEO. And then because I got people's trust and everything like that, they'd start asking me for websites. And so then I had to go find a website provider, and I would basically be a project manager and everything like that. And I did do some PPC. And actually, PPC was the first thing that I kind of said, I don't want to do this anymore, and that was just because it was a race to the bottom. There was to do PPC right, you had to spend a lot of money, get a lot of data. And there's people that were doing it for $150 management fee. And it was just like, man, you can have that business. It was just a lot of work. And even though I still believe it's a good way to make money, I believe all of these things are good ways to make money. But it was primarily SEO, did a website here and there. And yeah, that's it. Actually, SEO was my biggest thing with my traditional agency.
Perfect. So you said you started your agency kind of in the 2006 space, and you've been doing it a lot of years. When did you realize that maybe this might not be sustainable in a way that you wanted it to be, for the future?
Well, I'd like to correct you. I didn't start my agency technically in 06. But I was doing agency work for myself, and it was at a big scale. So, I mean, you could say marketing was primarily what I did, that in sales back then in about 06, 07. But I sold that business around 2017. So even though I've been doing it for quite a while, I didn't go full time for doing it for other people until 2017. So when I realized it, I want to say I kind of had the aha moment about the time chatbots were starting to really be the big craze, when ManyChat came out and all this other stuff. And I realized something, that, I was already doing SEO and I had a decent VA, but I always had to kind of, it was a real struggle for me, which I wish I would have known more about you back then with your SOPs and everything, to make sure to keep them busy, because I had to tell them exactly what to do, or to make sure the work was being done. And we made it through, but I thought, man, as I get more clients, this is going to be hard. How do you know? I mean, it's hard finding good people. It's even harder now, I would argue. But back then, it was really challenging, because just like, one of the struggles of selling SEO is that someone's got to trust you to at least give you 6 months to a year to figure out if they're doing their job. It's kind of the same thing with choosing a white label provider and a VA and everything. So, it's really hard to build a good team. And so I started thinking there's a better way. It's real. I knew that if I wanted to have the life that I wanted, I was going to have to scale. And, to scale, all I heard was, man, I'm just going to be babysitting again. And it just wasn't the direction I wanted to go, and I also realized that with SEO, as much as I loved it, I realized that either you have most clients fall in one of two things. Either they don't give you enough time and you're basically begging to keep your job, or you do your job really well and you're still begging to keep your job because they're already ranking pretty well. And even though, yes, you can get some people to stay on with you on, say, a maintenance package, it is difficult. So I kind of realized that even as you get bigger, the stress becomes harder to replace those customers, because not only are you, instead of losing a customer every, I don't know, 6 months or a year, you're 3 times as big. You got to replace those people because you still have that payroll of the people you that work for you. So, I just realized that to me, it just seemed stressful because it already was. I would look around and I would see certain businesses where it was reoccurring, but either it was product based where you would ship them something and they just keep on ordering like a subscription, but SEO was still a deliverable. So if you wanted to make twice as much money, I mean, in theory, you'd have to work twice as much or get someone else to do it. And so that's kind of when I realized, hey, I want something else. Let me keep my eye open, and truth be told, my last SEO client, I fired them about a month or two ago, and they were actually my very first customer back in 2017.
Let's unpack something there before, and I know we're going to share why you fired them and what you're moving on to. But before we do that, let's unpack this for a minute. You said something that's very near and dear to me as well, and that's SEO is recurring money. It is, right? People pay you month over month over month, but it's not passive money, meaning you have to continue to deliver. You have to get them more results. You have to move them up the food chain. When they get to the top of the search, they want more keywords, more cities, more. And so there's actual physical labor that has to happen. If it's not by you, it's by somebody else, a hired gun, a VA, whoever. But somebody has to write articles and keep doing blogs or keep doing links or there's something that has to continually be done. And like you said, I've figured it out. I got the processes, and I think I'm in a much better place, and why it doesn't affect me as much as it does other people.
Right.
But even me, who has it all figured out, Danny, I have the same exact frustrations as well. I sit on calls with clients and reporting calls with a smile on my face, and behind my eyes, it's probably saying, man, you're an idiot. I just made you a ton of money and all you do is bitch. I mean, that's what's going on in my head all the time, just constant pressure. I think that's the number one word when people would ask me, what's the negative of SEO? It's the constant pressure. And that's what I hear you saying. It was just constant pressure to deliver, pressure to keep the customers, pressure to look for more because the other shoe's going to drop and somebody's going to quit soon. Pressure because Google is freaking constantly changing everything because they'd like us all to go away and make everyone pay for AdWords, right?
Right.
How did that pressure affect your personal life?
Well, one thing that I was pretty good about was outsourcing. I mean, if you know one thing about me, Lisa, is I'm looking for the easiest way to make as much money as possible. So I learned pretty early on, I sure as hell wasn't going to be the one doing the work. I outsourced from the very beginning. And so that allowed me to keep a lot of my sanity, in all fairness, because I knew that if I wanted to scale a VA team, I wouldn't have a life, and what I think allowed me to work through it was that, and I'm going to kind of toot my own horn, is that I was really good, but I wasn't very big. Let's be clear. So I had time to spend with my clients. And so most of my clients, with the exception of a handful that just couldn't get it, because I was taking the time to explain things to them, they were very patient and they never had that before. So that really allowed me to not feel as much pressure as I would have, because I did go out of my way to make sure that they knew that we were working, what we were doing, and I tried to keep it pretty simple. But because I was small, I already felt the stress from having to deliver. And let's be honest, the silver tongue will only get you so far, right? And so I can say this: when I felt the pressure was when someone quit, because I didn't have, a ton of clients. Every one of them was either paying a VA, paying mortgage, paying something. So because I never got to the point that I did anything other than referrals or anything like that, it didn't get stressful, other than the fact that when I lost a client, it was a scramble to replace them. And I noticed something that I think is very important. I started noticing a pattern. I was taking on work I didn't want. And that's because I had bills to pay. That was probably the biggest stress, and why I was so eager to find something else. Because I would take on I don't enjoy web development, only because I'm not the one actually doing it, but I'm really good at, the conversion rate optimization, the copy, and building an incredible website. And I realized when I wanted to charge for a website would be starting at $5,000. How many people really want to pay that? That's kind of hard. Even though there's plenty of those customers, they're hard to find. And so I ended up taking website jobs for $1,500. And that's, and the way, and I put a lot of work into them, because I'm kind of a perfectionist when it comes to stuff like that. So I would take that job, and then I put in way more time than it deserved. And so it just created this vicious cycle. I would take one-time jobs because I'm like, oh man, I gotta make this much money to pay my bills, or to pay, these bills are coming up. And it was the cycle that I wasn't able to, I never felt like I was getting ahead, if that makes sense. I felt like I had a little leak in my boat. It wasn't big, and I had that bucket throwing the water out, and that's all I was doing. And it got me by. I mean, I did it for many years, but like I said, when I started seeing automation and other opportunities, which I'm sure we're going to get into, I realized, man, that's a lot more money per man hour. And if you really solve someone's problem, they pay you. They pay you like their light bill. And you kind of hit on something with SEO. It's really hard to take all the credit sometimes, even though you deserve it. Like people, they just see people walking in the door, or the phone just starts ringing. And because it's so gradual, I'll be honest, I feel they take it for granted. They don't care about Google Analytics. I mean, yeah, I can buy you more time, but when they're looking to cut, you knew you were one of the first in line.
Yep. So, and the more you charge a customer, the more you are the target when they need to cut, right? And that's a great segue into, so you're running your agency. You've been doing it for about 5 years. You're doing primarily SEO, but like many of us, I did the same thing when I was coming up. We take on all this work we don't want. We take on work that doesn't fit us well. And we struggle to find that balance and that happiness. And kind of like when I quit my corporate job, I got to the point where I looked in the future and thought, I can't do this for another 20 or 30 years. And at the rate I was going, that's minimally how long I would have to do it to be able to retire well. So I imagine, Danny, at some point, you started looking at your future thinking, man, do I just want to keep going on this path? And like me, hopefully, and we'll get into this here in a second, but I missed so many bolts, and I'm sure you did as well, right? And I'm sure you guys watch and have as well. I remember creating my first website in 1990 something. And then I went and worked for someone else and taught other people how to build websites. Why didn't I open a business? Why didn't I do that? I missed that bandwagon. And then the mobile revolution came around and I missed that bandwagon. And then, you know, this revolution and that revolution, we do it because we're comfortable and we're afraid to make change. But what I love about your story is you're not that guy. Like when you see something, I feel like you jump on it quickly. And so I'd like you to tell us how you, like, what happened? What did you see? What made you think, I want to be the hero in their story instead of the zero in their story? Like, how did you make that happen?
Well, you know, because I had my own business, still do, by the way, we still have an automotive customizing store with the family. I ended up noticing through trying to grow that business, I subscribed to a texting platform. Okay. And the name doesn't matter. I subscribed to it and I noticed a problem. And it was a problem we had. We were spending probably about $5,000 a month in pay-per-click, and still do to this day, by the way. And we would get tons of leads, you know, and to be more specific, it was for window tint, okay, like to tint the windows on your car. So it's a very competitive vertical to be in because it could be very profitable, you know. And we were spending so much money for these leads. The phone's ringing. I wouldn't be surprised if we were getting, oh God, between pay-per-click and GMB, easily 50 leads a day, quite a bit. And if there was more money to be spent in the impression share, we did it just because it was great. But the thing that I noticed is that when we would just call these people, because a lot of these people were filling out a form or whatever, we couldn't get them on the phone. And we ended up subscribing to just a texting platform, and we started texting people when we couldn't get them on the phone. And we noticed that we got a hold of about twice as many people. So then I was like, that's interesting. Maybe, you know, I'm glad we're doing this. And this platform was just a one-on-one texting platform. And I started thinking, man, I wish I could be a texting platform. And much like all of you, I'm in a lot of marketing groups, and I remember somebody had a deal where if you give them X amount of dollars, you can use this texting platform, hook it up to Twilio. And I did that, and I was able to get a couple customers, but I didn't really like the service. Wasn't that good. And when I found a good solution that did more than that, that actually really did texting right, that's when I realized I had something. Because most businesses don't text. Most businesses actually don't do anything for marketing. They just think they open up and it will come, right? And when I started working on the texting, I noticed that when I let people try it, they were just like me. All you had to do was use the tool, and you saw an instant bump in people buying, or at least giving you a chance. Because what happens with those people that are calling around getting quotes or filling out a form? You think you're the only one they message? No. And then with as bad as spam calls are, it turned into who can get to the customer first. And if they're doing, you know, if they're asking for quotes at midnight, you know, how do you get a hold of them? You know, and we were already calling multiple times, and most people can get up. So the texting, I realized texting was it, you know, and I found a platform that allowed me to scale. It allowed me to build a master template and be able to push it to 100 tent shops if I wanted to at once. And it just, everything was there. And I said, why am I doing anything else? And then that's when I started, all my existing customers signed up for it. And I didn't lose a single customer. They were like, this is great. They loved it. And you know, I was charging, my prices changed quite a bit, but my very first customer who I charged him $300 a month for the service, he's still with me. And I realized that same customer, I did SEO right before COVID, he was an SEO customer, and he would have to cancel the SEO because it was seasonal and he couldn't afford it and this and that. And I'm like, man, I'm making $300 a month with this texting platform. Now I charge $200 because I found that that's my happy point. And I make just as much money. Why am I going to manage VAs and provide reports and do a monthly meeting and explain to them why things are? I mean, I realize here's a texting platform. And once they use it, they're never going to quit. And it's not as competitive either. I mean, yeah, there's plenty of texting platforms, but there's not many of them that do it all right. And so that's when I started being like, okay, yeah, I slowly started building up my customer base with the software. And, you know, after I had about 3 or 4, I was like, man, I love seeing that credit card charge for $200-300 a month. And I was like, wow, I was having to do about four grand in SEO to make the same amount of money, to make $1,000, you know, the way I was set up, you know, because remember, I was outsourcing most of it. So my markup was somewhere between 20-30%. So if I sold $1,000 SEO package, I'd make $200-300. And that was still relatively passive, but I still had to deal with the customer on a regular basis. And I had to make sure that my vendors or my VAs were doing the work. And so the only person that could do the strategy was me. So I just said, man, this is a hell of a lot easier. And so I stopped trying to replace those SEO customers. I started hustling on getting people into my texting platform. And it was a much easier sell because of the price point was affordable. And I found that more people needed it than, I don't want to say SEO, but it worked for almost any business. So my market became bigger. You know, my customer avatar was larger. So I stopped taking, you know, someone said, hey, I need a website. I'm like, no, I'm sorry. But I have a platform that'll work with your new website, that'll help you make more money. And so I still take the referrals. I'll be honest. I mean, people still refer me for SEO. People still refer me for websites. They still refer me for ads. And I send them to other agencies. And I don't even worry about a cut of it, just because I just don't want to be in the middle of it. It was a hassle, you know, but I got them all to at least sign up or get interested in the texting platform, which does a lot of other things, by the way, but that's the fundamental thing in it. And it just allowed me to start. It took some time. You know, I've been doing it for a couple of years, and I was able to replace my income slowly but surely. So,
and Danny, I remember, and I want to share this with our community. I remember the first time you and I had a conversation about this, and I dug my heels in and said, it's all well and good, Danny, but I'm bringing in 3, 4, 5,000 a month per customer. You know, that would take a lot of people on $200 a month to replace. And I really wasn't open to hearing it until you said one thing to me. And what you said was, well, you can keep being the zero that has to go trudge and find the traffic and bring them the traffic, which they rarely convert. Or you can be the hero in the story and take whatever traffic they're getting from wherever they're getting it and convert it. Oh, and by the way, you can prove you're converting it to them. And so that was my big aha, because Danny really painted a vivid picture to me, because I sit on the calls, those reporting calls where you just want to, bang your head against the wall, because no matter how many leads you get them, no matter how many clicks you get them, no matter how many page one you get them, they don't care. But Danny's going in there and saying, here's a program, you put this in, and they're literally attributing sale to what he's doing.
First day, people are using the system. Yeah.
Yeah. It makes him the hero in the story. And I remember that clearly, because you said, I'd rather go find people who have traffic that are some poor sucker, I think you said, was getting them that traffic. It ain't me no more. And then I take that traffic and I convert it. And no matter who they're going to, work with, I'm the last guy they're going to fire.
Yep.
And that was an eye opener. Yeah. And for me, that was roughly 10 months ago. You and I had that conversation.
Right.
And I watched what you did, and we started doing some things together, and Danny started getting me to change my mindset. And that's why we come here every Monday, guys. We have to change our mindset. And it was something that resonated with me. Now, unlike Danny, I'm not firing clients because I have my systems worked out, right? I do have the freedom lifestyle. It doesn't cost me, more time when I bring on a new customer. It costs my team more time. But I also don't want to keep building and scaling that business larger and larger. I did want something else. So something else, Danny, I think is really important for you to share. When you fire a client that really has been a thorn in your side, how does that make you feel? And what has that done to your morale, so to speak?
Well, I'll say that my very first client was my nightmare client. And that's the one I recently fired.
So your first client was your nightmare client, and the one you've kept the longest for 5 years, and you just fired.
Let me go.
Yeah.
And
they'll tear you up and create havoc and cause you pain and suffering, but they kept their talents in, right?
Yeah. And every single time, I wanted to get rid of them, honestly, for about 2 years. And it just never made sense. I'm like, you know what? I'll take the money. At least they stay out of my hair for the most part. But when they were in my hair, they would ruffle my feathers, just because, they would always try to go outside of the scope of what I was hired to do. They were the kind of one where I pay you, you handle it. And at first, it was my own fault. I did it because I needed the money and I was eager to please. And so, they'd call me to make edits on their website. I'm like, you pay another company to host and build your website. Why are you bugging me? It's because I was so good at it. It was easier for him just to come to me. And it just snowballed from there to where he just kept on saying, hey, I need this, I need that, and I need a new website. And I found myself having to explain things over and over. It just wasn't an ideal client. And they had it. I saw an opportunity to get out. They were looking to get a new website, and they were looking at, I told them I didn't want to do it, and they were looking at someone else. And then that someone else says, hey, we can do your SEO. Hey, we can. I'm like, that sounds like a great idea. You should do that. You were my last customer. I basically just said, you guys go ahead. And they were actually using my texting software, and I fired them off of it because I just didn't want to deal with them anymore.
So you also fired them on the texting just to have a clean break.
It's the only client that I've done that to, but it's just,
and I can tell you why that's a great idea, because it's kind of like a spoiled, kid, or whatever you want to call it. You can't undo it. You can't undo the wrong you've done. And I still have clients now. I'm like you, Danny. When Danny started getting this stuff in my head, I haven't actively fired customers, but I have let go of customers. And what I mean by that is this year alone, we have had, I want to say 3 or 4 customers that were from the beginning, just like Danny, right? And we gave them too much and we did too much for them. And we we're constantly doing things that were outside of the scope of what they were paying for. And the renewals came up. I had one customer who was paying us $10,000 a year in cash at tax season, which really only equated to like $800 a month for SEO in a highly competitive niche. And they wanted us to change the website. So I basically said, hey, this is what you need to pay going forward, or we feel like we're not doing you any favors and you should probably move on. And they did. So technically, Danny, I guess I have, since I met you, fired 3 or 4 clients, but I did it in a way to where they can come back if they want, but they're going to pay what they need to pay and they're going to follow the rules or they're not going to come back. And what I love about that is it felt good. You don't know how much of a burden certain clients are on you until they're gone. Now, as Danny said, if you need the money, that's a hard thing to do. If you're counting on that $800 a month to pay your car payment or to pay your rent or to pay, your mortgage, then you're not going to do it. But Danny, for those people who are in that position, what would you say?
The expression is, if you don't change anything, nothing's going to change, if I hadn't started changing my tactics, I'd still be in that rut. And in all fairness, it took time. You're right, at $200-300 a month per client. It took a while to build up that revenue, but I felt slowly the pressure being taken off. And I'd like to really put it in perspective. Say I've got, I don't know, let's say I got 30 clients. I haven't counted in a while. Those 30 clients, I am not joking, take about an hour a month with my other platform.
Say that again.
I work about an hour a month with this platform. Now, for the existing customers, where I put in a little bit more time is, and I'm about to, obviously, with you, where I want to start bringing in clients at scale, and I put more emphasis in the sales process. Instead of explaining SEO, I'm explaining the benefits of why they need the system. But more importantly, I do spend a little extra time on onboarding, because I found that with my system here, the customer stays longer. So the lifetime value is higher for me, at least profit-wise, than SEO. So, to put it in perspective, let's just keep the math easy. If I'm charging $200 a month, that $200 a month for a year, which, mind you, they usually stay. I haven't had anybody leave yet, except for the one that I fired, by the way. That's $2,400 a year for one client. And say I spend an hour in the sales process and an hour on onboarding, that's $1,200 an hour.
Versus SEO, that might be $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year.
Yeah.
But as you were saying, maybe your profit was $200 out of that 1,000. So you're making the same amount of money, but now you're babysitting VAs, you're managing process. You're going to have to, keep up with the latest trends in SEO. You're going to have to meet with them and show them reports, and I could go on. So the amount of money you were making per hour was less. Mm-hmm. And I quickly did a little math there. So just so you guys, hear this, because you guys know how much I love math. And to me, math sells every idea. If you had 30 clients paying you $200 a month, that's $6,000 a month, guys. Now, if you had 6 SEO clients, I guarantee you, and Danny, we can talk about this too, you're going to find it easier to get 30 of these easy clients versus 6 of the SEO clients.
Yeah.
Not to mention all the management. And now you got to hire people and you got to have processes. And listen, I'm an SEO. I'm a damn good one. And I teach it and I live it and I breathe it. But my mindset is changing as well. And that's why I did decide to bring Danny on today and do a hot seat with Danny, because I learned the same as you guys do, that sometimes we got to pivot. And so before we get into more of that, Danny, again, we've had some people show up in the beginning, and then a bunch of people have come on since we started. So I want to reiterate, Danny is one of our members, one of our students, but at the same time, Danny has become one of our trainers. Why? Because I recognize that this was such an amazing opportunity for my business that I went out and started doing what Danny was doing. And I've never looked back. It's an amazing system. And I hope it'll eventually replace SEO. But for now, I'm not getting rid of my clients like Danny is. But Danny and I together have gone in on some things. So like you see behind him, Local Remix, that's the name of his new company. And we're in together on that. He's also in together on the course. So I want full disclosure as you're watching this, that Danny's story moved me so much that for the first time in my years on this planet, I had the inclination to partner with someone, right? I don't do partners. I don't do other people in my business. And he's the first guy that I said, I want to ride with him and be on this ground floor and be in this. And so that's why I wanted him to come in. And over the next several months, we're going to do one of these hot seats every single month. And you're going to start seeing more students who are in this new program with Danny and I. But I wanted you guys to hear Danny's story. So I just wanted to interject that. Full disclosure, Danny and I are now in business together. We are selling a course together. We are doing things together. But I wanted you guys to hear that as you hear it. But I didn't know all of Danny's story either. So I had some questions. So let's get back to, you're firing your clients. Got it. Get rid of all those SEO clients and those PITAs, right? Those PITAs. The platform's not just texting. There's plenty of things you can sell on this platform. And I know you've already told me this, and it was part of the reason I got on board, but the hook on texting, the hook on SaaS, right? So Danny's moved to SaaS, software as a service type of business. Most of this stuff is set it and forget it, right?
Most of it, yeah.
And the customer uses the system themselves.
Yes.
And so when you say it's an hour, to sell them and an hour to set them up, after that, what are you doing to ensure that they're not constantly bugging Danny?
That's where the onboarding comes on. I want to say that it's a texting platform, but it replaces 12 different services, from hosting to landing pages, to email newsletter, to texting. It has something like Calendly, like a widget where people can book their own appointments. It does reputation management. So there's a lot of different angles depending on what fits, and it does so much that you can overwhelm someone. But I think of it like a Swiss Army knife. You only need one tool to get your foot in the door, and you just use that one tool, but you have them all available to you. I don't go in and straight up just say, hey, texting. The thing is what gives me instant credibility is I just tell my story. Hey, look, let me tell you something. I have something. I started texting with my business. I started making a lot more money because, anybody that has to call people to chase them down to give them a quote or whatever, which happens a lot in the automotive world, the texting is a must-have tool, and most people just don't have anything. So there's a lot of different angles, but it all starts with a problem. I mean, that's my approach. I walk into a business, or I'm doing business with someone oftentimes, and you can usually tell just by trying to picture, because you're a customer, the customer journey. And the biggest opportunity is the follow-up. I have employees now in my traditional business, and I think of them as order takers. I mean, I spend a fortune for leads. They don't have to, all they have to do is answer the phone. And then they take the low-hanging fruit. Okay, let me get an appointment to tint my windows. And I think of all the other people that they just say, yeah, it's going to be $300, tint your car. Okay, thanks, bye. And they're gone. And that applies to almost every business. What if I can bring some of those people back? I don't know any business owner that would say no. And that's my main hook.
And what's important here, and a couple people in the chat are asking the platform, and we're not going to talk about the platform today. We have other content. I'll send you replays where we talk about that. What's important here is the platform's that's not what's important. Okay. Yes, Danny's found a great platform. We have a course about it. We can teach you it. Remember, this is Monday Mindset. I want you guys to get your minds thinking this way. Platform doesn't matter because big boys can sell platform all day long. Fancy salespeople can walk in and sell a business a platform. After Danny taught me this, I walked into a restaurant for something else, a meeting about something else, and I sold the restaurant owner on a basically text type of VIP loyalty program. And in less than 2 months, he's added over 200 people to a list that now every week he sends out specials, he sends out things, and he's increased already like $1,500 a month in sales. Is he firing us? Never. Right? Because we didn't sell him a platform. He didn't care about the platform. In fact, he had a platform. He already had a texting platform when I met him that he never used. Danny taught me the very simple thing that I already knew, but still needed to hear it again. They buy you and your ideas. And the fact that you're coming in and holding their hand to get them set up and giving them ideas. And you're only a phone call away, but they won't need it if you set them up properly. So in my opinion, it's less about the platform and more about how you can position something for someone. Like Danny, he talks about problems, right? The problem with most businesses, dead on, is they don't follow up. I don't care if they're getting traffic from people walking in off the streets, if they're getting traffic from Google AdWords, if they're getting traffic from SEO. It doesn't matter where the traffic's coming from. They're letting the traffic come and then leave and never following up with them again. You know why? It's too hard. I'm trying to run my business. I want you to think like them. You're a business owner, right? Running your business is hard. It's a lot of work. There's a million things to always do, right? So texting and bringing people back in, or getting people to buy more, or getting people to see more, it's hard. I'm a offender of that. Agency Fast Track is 2 years old. We don't have a solid plan, but with Danny's help, we're getting there. With Danny's help, I'm starting to do those things. Even for my agency, my Portside Marketing Agency, we're starting to do those things. And you know what? We're seeing better results. So the reason I asked Danny to come here is I want you to hear his story. I want you to hear that he's just like us, right? SEO, websites, doing the traditional business. And he had the guts to say, enough. This is never going to change. There's no product I can buy. There's no course I can take that'll change the fundamental design of SEO. Now, I love SEO and I'm going to keep doing it. And I'm still going to teach you guys the stuff I teach you about processes and building. So if you want to stay in that, great. But I do want you to open your mind to there's a better way, because you're going to see our channel transition over the next year. And we're still going to talk about the traditional stuff. I'm not going to leave you guys hanging, but it's probably going to be highly weighted with this new stuff. It's easier, it's simpler, and it's making us a ton more profit. That's the key. Higher return on investment, higher hourly wage. Because at the end of the day, that's what's key, right? You think about the guy in downtown who has a parking lot, and he could have put up a big skyscraper. It would cost him a ton of money, and he would have been in debt for 20 years. But what does he do? He turns that space into a parking lot and charges $30 a day to park there. Pure profit, right? Doesn't have to work a day, just collects money. So we try to keep these under an hour, Danny. We have just about 5 minutes left. If somebody's watching right now and they're thinking, yeah, Danny, this sounds too good to be true. I work my ass off to get my SEO business and my agency, or vice versa. I have worked my ass off and I can't get this started. What's the number one hint, tip, trick, or benefit, whatever you think? What's the one thing you would tell someone right now?
Baby steps. Baby steps.
Why do you say baby steps?
Because it's real easy to get discouraged. I mean, I couldn't make the jump right away. I was in the same rut, where it just felt like a vicious cycle where all I was doing was working my ass off and getting by, but every client that I was able to sign up under the new system added up. And it took time. It took me 2 years. But I don't, there's no such thing as a magic pill. I mean, I'll tell anybody, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it, but this is the easiest thing I've ever come across, and I can go into details as to why in the platform, but that's not the point right now. It took time, and I wouldn't be able to be here now talking about courses and this and that, because I wouldn't have time. I'd be too busy fulfilling SEO and building websites, so it starts with setting a goal, and even, like putting in perspective when oh yeah, it's only $199 when you could charge someone $2,000 for SEO or $1,000 for SEO. It seems like it's not the same, but it really is. Like I told you, I was making 20-30% off $1,000, and if I'm selling this service for $200-300, I'm making the same amount of money. So when you say 6 clients of SEO, that was 6 clients of SEO having to generate $6,000 a month or $1,200 a month. It was the same amount of money in my pocket. It was just an easier sell. But
I love it, Danny.
It didn't happen overnight.
Yeah, the advice is solid. Baby steps. Somebody just asked in the chat, are y'all ditching SEO and websites? Danny is. Danny's ditched it. He's done. He's not going to do any more SEO. He's not going to do any more websites, because he spent the last 2 years baby stepping his way to that, right? He didn't just one day said, fire everyone and be broke. He built that business slowly, and now he can fire clients. I am not saying I am stopping SEO or website, but I will tell you this, I'll probably never stop website design. And that's because it is truly one of my passions. I love website design. I have a team for it. Yeah, we have a great team. SEO, I could give it up. I'm not going to right now, but I'm doing exactly what Danny just said. I am baby stepping into this. Well, for me, it's never baby steps, right? I'm going all in, and I'm adding these services to every customer now I bring on board. If they want a website, I'm adding this platform. I'm adding the texting. I'm adding some of these other things. Over time, if it adds up to enough, I may stop doing some of these other services. But more importantly, I'll be able to be hyper selective. You heard Danny talk about taking on the wrong clients. I might still take on those clients, but now I'm only taking on the right clients, because my cash cow I'm trying to build is more in the passive recurring side of the house. And that's not something that's very abnormal for you guys. You hear me talk about all that time with hosting and other things. So we're definitely making a change. But we've got to close up because these are only an hour long, and I actually have a meeting at 11 o'clock. So I've got 2 minutes to close this up. Danny, thank you so much for coming and sharing your story. I feel like we could talk to you for another hour. So if you're willing, maybe in a few months, we'll have you back for another hot seat and kind of, finish your journey. So I appreciate you coming and being open and honest and just telling people how it is. Guys, if you want to learn more about what Danny's doing, normally on a hot seat, we don't plug anything because there's nothing to plug. But in fact, Danny and I have partnered together. We've created a new program called Agency Fast Track Revenue System, where Danny and I are teaching with a large heavy on Danny. We're teaching what Danny is doing. We're teaching the new system. We're teaching you how to set it up. We're teaching you how to go get clients, how to close them, how to onboard them. And this is my favorite part, how to use what he's doing in your own business to automate your own stuff. And you'll see more of that coming down the pike as I do that for my own agency and my own businesses. We were going to officially launch this tomorrow. We got a little behind in some stuff. So we believe we're going to officially launch this either next week or the week after. Feel free to type in the comments. You're going to get an email either way. If you're in our email list, you are going to get an email either way when we launch this. And Danny's name will be all over it and all that good stuff. But I'm so excited about this. We are going to now every month for the next 3 or 4, I'm going to invite for a hot seat. We had a founders group that tested what Danny's doing, and we're going to feature one of those people every month so you guys can see what this new stuff is all about. On the other 3 weeks, we'll still talk about our normal stuff. Again, I personally am not getting out of SEO and website design because my business runs on its own. I have the freedom lifestyle. It doesn't cost me hours. My ROI is 70 or 80% on SEO. That's abnormal, by the way. That's a very, very hard thing to get to. With this new service, easy, so much easier to do. Okay, Danny, again, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. At the end of this video, if you're watching the replay, we will put some links for you where you can find out more information about the program and also about what Danny is doing. Guys, remember, come here every week. No matter if we're talking to Danny or just talking regular stuff, come here to get your minds in the right place because business is more about mindset than it is about all the shiny objects and tools and that kind of thing. If we can get our minds in the right place, everything else falls into place. Have an amazing, prosperous week, everyone, and we will see you back here next week for our Monday Mindset. Thank you. Thank you, Danny.
Thanks for having me.